Welcome to SUBURBICON, a town of great wonder and excitement.
Hey there.
Built with the promise of prosperity for all.
Nikki, you need to get up. There are men in the house. Son, there's something I have to tell you. Those men killed Mom.
We've decided it'd be best if your Auntie Margaret came and stayed with us.
Nikki needs a mother.
We'll be strong. We'll be fine.
Mr. Lodge?
Yes.
You know a character named Rizzoli? He's a loan shark. If you were into the mob for money, that might explain what happened to your wife. Hi, pal.
This is the last time that clown's gonna ignore us. Take care of a kid.
Nikki?
These animals took everything from us. I have to make decisions like what's best for the family.
Any progress on the investigation?
A mobster got killed a couple of days ago.
I can end the conversation real quick.
I'm sorry for his loss.
Life? Yeah, I guess he probably is too.
Nobody speak.
I'm here to collect. What do you want? I want all of it. All of it.
Nothing like this ever happened here.
This is a safe place. It was.
Would you like a cup of coffee?
Nobody speak. Towns and villages burning, looting, and pillaging.
I could have you killed in no time. I could kill you, too.
Nobody speak. Nobody gets show.
Thank you very much. Welcome to tonight's screening.
God, I want to see more movies like this, movies that are just creative for the sake of being creative and free.
We sold out the Elgin Theater!
My people! Toronto Film Festival!
Great films, they leave me feeling a little more alive and connected, and they remind me to laugh and hope and hurt and feel.
I just want to tell great stories, and I want to tell different stories. We don't only have to tell one type of story.
We're good to go. Hey, everybody. Welcome. This is the press conference for SUBURBICON. The way it's going to work is I'll ask a question to each. We'll have a little bit of a conversation, then we'll go to you. And there's going to be mic runners out there. So if you want to identify yourself to a person with a microphone, because sometimes we're blinded by the lights, and you can get a moment. Hello, George.
Hello. How
Matt,
are you?
Julianne, Karimah, how are you? Grant,
I'm good,
welcome.
thank you. Hello.
This is two movies became one in this one. Yeah. How'd that happen?
Grant and I were looking at a piece about Levittown, Pennsylvania, an event that happened in Levittown, Pennsylvania, because we'd seen some things on the campaign trail where they were talking about building fences and scapegoating Mexicans and Muslims. And we were always reminded that these aren't new things and new moments in our history, and we thought it'd be interesting to talk about it. But we wanted it to be entertaining. We didn't want it to be a documentary. We didn't want it to be a, eat your spinach piece of filmmaking. So we merged it with SUBURBICON because we thought it was a funny idea to put it in the suburbs in the 1950s when we all thought everything was so perfect, if you were, a white straight male, and to have it sort of everybody looking in the wrong direction. So that's how it came about.
And you knew about there was this Coen Brothers script, and you just thought we can kind of put these two together.
Well, the Coen Brothers had offered me to play the part that Oscar Isaac plays, and they offered me to play it in 1999 or something. The film never got made, and when I called up Oscar to do the part, people asked me why didn't I play it, and I was like, because I got Oscar Isaac, which is, you know, not a bad move.
And what's the challenge of trying to merge the two?
Getting the tone right and writing in a style that that matched what kind of existed. That's the tricky part, and trying to make it feel seamless. But it was fun. It was a little bit like a puzzle. Yeah.
Karimah, you play a real character in a fictional setting, yes. And some of the family were here, I believe, last night, right?
Yes.
To talk about wrapping your head around that.
It was amazing. It was very emotional. I felt very emotional about it, especially talking to them afterwards, and the grandson expressing that I reminded him of his grandmother, and they felt that I was pretty right on with my approach and how I basically lived as her, and so it was very moving. It was very touching.
The two children that were here yesterday, Linda and Barry, talked to me about the moment when they were banging on instruments and you're still hanging laundry, and they said that's exactly what their mother did, and they felt exactly what their mom had felt, and they were really proud of that moment for you.
Yeah, it was humbling.
For Matt and Julianne, I mean, it gets so dark in this film so quickly for you guys. So dark so quickly. Attracted you to the role? Is that?
I mean, I'd never been asked to do something like this, so it was so much fun to play these, you know, these two characters. I mean, we just had a ball, and I mean, much like Downsizing, this was another script I was reading going, wow, you know, they're gonna make this? Like, that's really great. I just love the aspect that the Myers family, you never know them, right? It's you can't, because, and that's the point, you know. It's
with no dialogue. It's amazing how strong.
Because the town never bothered to get to know them. They just freaked out.
Yeah, they just blame them. They blame them for absolutely everything. And then you see us in our little house, kind of quietly going about our dirty little business, consistently making bad choices. Right. And what I do love about it tonally too is that it starts in this kind of kooky comedic level, and it gets progressively darker and darker and darker until it becomes a true noir. Bad people doing bad things, and it ends up being shocking, I think.
It's a man covered in blood riding a bicycle down the street, and people are protesting the African-American family that moves in.
It's like, talk about white privilege, right? You can, you know, covered in blood, yeah. You know, and no, it's not him. It's these people.
You know, I once interviewed an artist, Joe Strummer from The Clash, who said that an artist's responsibility is to be of their time. That's your job. And watching this, what I thought was so interesting was set in the 50s, obviously incredibly relevant today, pre-Charlottesville. But then it was set in the North, because the real Levittown situation happened in the North. When you hear about racism, especially in America, it's always the South. Was it important for you to showcase that?
I grew up in Kentucky, you know, so I grew up, you know, it's an interesting thing. You know, I grew up in the 60s and 70s in Kentucky, and we sort of thought we were exercising this. You know, segregation had come to an end, and we really felt like everything, the trajectory was going the right way. It didn't, it stalled. And when you see in film this kind of bigotry, it's always Mississippi burning. You know, it's always Southern guys saying terrible things. And the Northeast likes to say, well, we weren't like that. And you want to go, well, actually you were. You know, you're not absolved of all of this either. And I thought that was an important part of it. Even in casting, we had to make sure that we really didn't have anybody, you know, with Southern accents along the way. You know,
I wanted to do a British accent, but he wouldn't let me.
He's very good at a British accent. You should see him.
Oh, I thought you were doing a British accent.
Yeah,
that was your British accent, wasn't it?
Karimah, how much did you talk much to the family beforehand and figure out how to do this? Because as a woman of color, you know that this is not. It's in the news a lot more now, but it's not new.
Exactly. No, it's not new. I did not have an opportunity to meet or talk with the family before filming production, but I did read the book. The mother, Daisy Myers, she had written a book called Sticks and Stones, and so I was able to obtain a copy of that. So I read that and researched everything I could online and watched the documentary. That there was something on YouTube clips, and that was very helpful with giving me a lot of insight about the world, and also her book gave me a lot of insight about what they actually felt and what they actually went through, you know, outside of what's in the script. So that was helpful.
You grew up in the deep suburbs. You weren't suburban, were you? Was it where you lived? Was it really suburban?
I didn't grow up in the suburbs at all. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. Very much, I mean, really not the suburbs at all.
How suburban were your lives?
I lived in the suburbs.
No, I grew up in a city in Cambridge.
Yeah, that's right.
City.
So like this suburb feel was this really your hell that you created?
Well, I grew up in a suburb that was very similar in the sense that it was still being built when we moved in. Like, all the houses were the same. All the, the streets. They were all named after birds, and it was incredibly. It was very white.
Which bird did you have?
Quail. Quail Wood, 29529, and we were one of the only Jewish families, and even that I felt a little. So I can't even imagine, if a African American family had moved in, what would have been going on.
We got mics kicking around here. Yeah, go ahead. First question. We'll get a mic over here.
Bruce, you really do get the first question.
Hey, it's your tradition. George, good to see you again. Julianne, love to see you again. You scared the hell out of me in both roles in this movie. I retired as a film critic in December. I came out of retirement for TIFF just so I could bug you, George, with another question. Okay, go. And one of the things that really fascinates me about this film is the tone. And the tone, putting a demented Coen brothers crime caper, very bloody, up against a very elegant, refined story of the early civil rights. I thought it was a stroke of genius. But how did you know how much crazy-ass humor and violence to put in so as not, you didn't really want to drown the beauty and elegance of the civil rights story? But how much do you do?
Well, it was tricky. We had to change some things in editing. Times changed. While we were shooting, Trump was elected. And it changed some of the temperature of the film in a weird way, because the country got angrier. Whichever side you were on, the country got angrier. And it reminded us that we have to play with this tone a little differently. We had scenes with Josh Brolin that are some of the funniest scenes we've ever shot. I sent them to Josh and we had to cut them out because one was it was away from the house, and you felt like if the boy could get away from the house, you were going to let the air out of the balloon. You could tell somebody. And the other was that they're really slapstick funny. It's Josh Brolin in a baseball uniform talking to a bunch of 9-year-old kids trying to explain to them what the word fuck means. And it's really funny, and it's really wrong, and it felt like the wrong tone suddenly. It felt like we were getting off into the weeds. And we had a few of those. The killers, we had to tone down some of their slapstick stuff. We had to make them a little more dangerous. But that's always, tone is what you win or lose on in films, right, in general, particularly when you're playing in this kind of genre. And, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. I've had it go both ways. And so this was one where we tested the film knowing what tone we wanted. Score was a big piece of the tone. This is a really complicated story at the end because this is a Paramount Pictures that ultimately, we financed it ourselves, but ultimately Paramount releases it. And it's very hard in the big world of studios to leave a film the way we leave a film. Two boys throwing a baseball at the end. And there were lots of notes like, can the boy be adopted by the black family? Which you'd think, well, in 1957, probably not. And so I had to go to Alexander Desplat, the composer, and say, look, we have to know that these kids are going to be okay. And the only the only way to do it and to show tone is by the score. So score had something to do with tone as well. There was things we had to play with along the way.
Go ahead.
Welcome out of retirement.
Who's got the next microphone? Microphone right there.
Hello, Juan Carlos Garcia from Mexico City. This is for the cast. It's obviously a reflection about what is going on right now with the world racism. And also it's happening something that is very important, that the hurricanes, what happened in Houston, what happened in Florida. Do you think this is the moment to think what is going on with the human being against nature, against society, what is happening? And what do you think, how would you contribute to do a better world?
First of all, are you a rapist or a criminal? I just need to get that. I just want to check. Okay. So you're one of the good ones. Okay, that's very good to know.
But you are in Canada. He's not in the United States.
I understand, but we want to keep
down.
it that way.
Yeah, okay.
Thinking about a northern border wall.
Remember?
Yeah.
Canada's cool.
Well, if it's tough, you know, you never know when you're making a movie. You know, a lot of these kind of current events are we couldn't have predicted, and are you know. Things like Charlottesville, obviously. I mean, everything was obviously there, but it just the lid hadn't been torn off it, and it seems like this presidency has kind of reinvigorated this you know, this certain element, and emboldened them to kind of step out into the open, which is, you know, I mean, I naively was shocked by that, but you know, it's always been there. You know, it goes back to the original sin of the country, you know, and we've never reckoned with that. We fought a big war over it, you know, 160, 70 years ago, and then it was almost like we were the conflict-averse child of a divorce. Like, okay, that's over. Let's not talk about that anymore, and let's all move on. Everything's good, right? And we never really dealt with it, and that issue is going to plague us until we have an honest reckoning with it. But in terms of the events, you know, we never could have predicted it. I mean, you know, I think you write these things and you make them because they feel honest and true and relevant, and then, you know, sometimes current events agree. You know, you become kind of right in the bullseye of the zeitgeist, and sometimes you don't.
Also, I think it's because you were talking about Houston and Florida, and it's also important to watch what's happening in Florida. We're all worried about, but we see it in Houston. It's going to take a long time. What's happened in Houston, and we're all going to have to be involved. When you said, how do you make a better world? We're all going to have to be involved because Houston is Syria, quite honestly. People in Houston are now refugees based on something that had nothing to do with them. They didn't do anything. They are now victims, and they're out of their homes, and they're going to be suffering for a long period of time. And much like the people and children in Syria, we're going to have to find ways to be involved. That is our job as citizens of the world. And all of us are going to find our ways to do that. So you're right. How are we going to make the world better? I think the only way we can do it is all of us do whatever way we can to be involved. I grew up at a time when that was sort of mandatory in the 60s and 70s, and I hope we get back to that more.
Sure.
Well, when we were in Venice, Ai Weiwei was there with the film that he made about refugees, and he talked about precisely that. It's like, how do we get beyond nationalism and tribalism and racism and be more inclusive and start thinking of ourselves as human beings of the world, you know? Because this is happening everywhere, where people are being forced out of their homes and their nations and are looking for a place to go, and the only way we can help each other is by eradicating all of those borders and thinking globally.
Up front here.
Hi, good morning. Barbara Dudinska, Sita News Agency. I watched the movie, and there were two things that struck me. George Clooney made a little boy cry, and God Matt Damon beaten up. So I wonder, what was their reaction when they read their script?
Well, it's better than making Matt Damon cry and beating up a little boy.
Really depends on where you sit, right?
Well, I mean, that's my options. I just thought this was the right thing to do. Karimah, right? I mean, I shouldn't be beating children. And I can't believe you're advocating beating children. That's what's wrong with you? Listen, I'll tell you, it wasn't just beating Matt up. One of the most fun moments I've had on that set was when the prop guy brought a normal-sized bicycle over, and I was like, no, 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 no. We're going to have a bike about that big for Matt, and we're going to put him on that. Matt's been a good sport. We've been good friends a long period of time, and you know there are very few actors in the world that are capable of being, you know, the Bourne supremacy, being a Jason Bourne and killing people, and then turn around and be the buffoon who can't do anything right, the gang who couldn't shoot straight,
but also kills people.
But also kills people, but purely by accident, you know. And I feel like that's sort of everybody came on board to do that. You know, that little boy is something spectacular. I played a pediatrician on ER, so I worked with kid actors all the time. Most kid actors are just there because their parents want them there, and it's not great. This kid should be in front of a camera. He is normal and fun, and both the boys, they were fantastic, fantastic young men.
Who's got the microphone next to you?
Hi, Noah Taylor with dorkshelf.com. George, I was just wondering why the Coen brothers didn't go ahead with the 99 version, and when did they hand it off to you?
They didn't, you know, it's an interesting thing. They tried for years. I think they started writing it in the mid-'80s. A lot of things happened. I think that they've done films similar to this in tone.
This is around the Blood Simple era, wasn't it, when they wrote it?
Yeah, when they first wrote it. And I think as time went on, they'd done Fargo and then Burn After Reading. They'd done things along the same themes, and they didn't really want to. Some of the third act didn't really exist. They changed a few things, and other writers had come on for a while, so things had changed a little bit. So it wasn't quite the same film, and it just never got made. Also, a weird thing happens, as you guys probably know. A script can get caught up in a studio. Other producers can get tied to it. Fees can get tied to it, and suddenly there's $7 million against a movie that you can't make for a lot of money. You know, so it makes it prohibitive, and you can't make the film. So we had to coerce people to, you know, take a pass on their fees, and you know, a lot of that kind of stuff to get the film out. And that really happened. We talked to them, I guess, 2 years ago. Right about this time 2 years ago, was when we first had a conversation with Joel and Ethan about doing it. So.
Yeah, on this side here, yes, ma'am.
Mila Kanev, Mix TV. Actually, it was really great, superb acting and directing, and it was so many challenging scenes. I'm just wondering, what was particularly challenging scene for the actors to play and for George to direct?
The scene with the ping pong paddle was, and we figured out actually that
sustained an injury.
Yeah, that
you got the injury.
Yeah, from the angle we were at. It looked like I was hitting her if I hit my own ass, and which was good by me because I could really haul off and hit myself. You know, I didn't want to hit Julie, so I broke one of the paddles. I mean, I was really giving it to myself, and I didn't realize the next day I got up in the shower and my wife went, "What is going on?" And I went, "What?" And I turned around and I looked, and my entire right cheek was black and blue.
Was that direction from George or just personal choice?
Well, George said, you know, yeah, you really want to be
smack yourself.
giving it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so that was a brand new challenge for me.
And for you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it was. I mean, what's always challenging is tone, but what was great about it is that George had a grasp of it, you know, so whenever you felt like, you know, is this too big, is this too small, is this whatever, you know, we all would kind of end up in the same place. But that being said, it was a tremendous pleasure to go to work every day because George is so prepared, and the level of talent on, you know, on the cast and the crew was extraordinary. So it just was a very pleasurable work experience.
What was the challenge?
I think the most challenging scene for me was the scene when I was outside hanging clothes on the clothing line. I didn't have any dialogue, but and that was something that you added, and I just kept thinking for myself, like, wow, what if this was me? You know, it was kind of outside of it a little bit, and that it just made me very angry. And so that's something that I remember outside of the entire event of everything that was happening. I remember specifically just feeling like, no, just really judging the moment heavily. And so, yeah.
Also, do you remember you came when we did some of the protests, the actual people protesting, and you stood inside the house because you said, I want to see this. Yeah. And it's all actors and extras, and everybody was doing it because you have to do it for the movie. But it was really disturbing to be there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that was, I remember being very affected watching, particularly you and Laith have to deal with that. It's frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole story. I mean, for me, the Myers whole experience was hard, you know, and frustrating. So as the actor, you know, it was nothing really, you know, pleasant about it, you know. But I remember that scene with the clothes, hanging the clothes up, because they were like literally in my face, you know, playing the instruments. So it was kind of like, that's one outside of the many experiences that I really remember that on set.
I think we.
I would think probably what Karimah was talking about a little bit. The trickiest part was we were in a very racially diverse neighborhood in Fullerton, California, and we had about 350 extras who were going to hurl a lot of racial slurs and say a lot of pretty terrible things that are against any decent human beings, you know, what you would think is okay. And having to say to everyone, okay, we're going to do something that's really awful, and it's going to feel terrible. And everybody, and I mean this to a man, everybody there who was making the film, the crew and everyone, we all just felt sick, you know, when we were doing it. And listening to, because these are things that happened. They sang church hymns, they played instruments, they hung Confederate flags over the fence, they built a fence around their house. So these things were things that really happened, but it was sickening to be part of it, you know, quite honestly. So that was, I think, the most difficult things to shoot.
Right there.
Hi, George. I am from India Blooms, a part of the world, actually. So my question is, you have a long association with Matt. Can you tell me if you have anyone in choice before Matt for the...
Do I have any what?
So was Matt the second choice?
Matt was always the second choice. Matt, I like to say Matt was the best available.
I'm like his default. When everyone else passes, he's got these photographs of me that he's had since around 2001, and
I've never seen a goat shaved before.
Was he always the first choice for this film?
Oh yeah. Look.
This is a part of a prank that you get.
Prank?
Yeah.
Oh no. Yeah. You know, I do pranks when I'm bored on a set and have nothing else to do. This is when you're directing, you don't have a whole lot of time to do terrible things. But look, I get to benefit from having 3 incredibly wonderful actors who, honest to God, you put them in the situation and say, help. You know, you can plan where to put the camera, you can plan how to cut it, you can plan how you want the tone to be, but you're going to require, you know, wonderful, smart, intelligent, intuitive actors to carry you over the finish line. And if you can't, you get Matt. No.
Last question over here at the end. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Francie Dimitrovska from Ryerson University. So George, you've often said that you like to pick fights in your film, and this is an interesting fight to pick through, I guess, the vision of the Coen brothers. But I wanted to actually ask Karimah, what is fighting this particular battle like, especially as it may parallel with your career and your struggles through getting through this industry as a woman, especially as a woman of color?
What is this battle like? I'm sorry, can you just clarify your question a little bit for me?
Well, the film revolves a little bit around your status as a woman of color and the struggles that you may face throughout the film. And I was wondering if at any point during the film you were prompted to reflect on your struggles as an actress of color.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of. I think very early on, there was a lot of correlations as far as what I've experienced in Hollywood, you know, as an actress. I've worn my hair natural for a very long time, probably about 20 years. And so when I first moved to Hollywood, I had an afro. And I had my manager back then said, you never work with your hair like that. You need to do something else with your hair. You need to straighten it. And so it was like, that's one situation that I had. And like I said, that was probably about 17 years ago. And I really struggled with that for years. My looks, especially my hair, natural hair was not as big as it is now. And so that was one thing. I mean, I feel like things have changed so much in the industry. We have a lot of, women, African-American women starring in shows now. So I feel like just like there's been progress as far as thinking of the Myers situation and racism, we have so much more further to go. There's been progress in Hollywood as well. So I just feel like it's a matter of time, but there's still a lot of things that we're facing on both sides as far as racism and then things that I experienced as an actress in Hollywood.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.